Marjorie's wineglass snapped clean in her hand when my husband slapped a stack of papers onto my parents' dining table. We finalized everything at the title company this afternoon, Cole Harrington announced, grinning at my dad. Mitchell Storage and Supply is transferred, and you're moving into that assisted living condo we toured. Remember? My dad's face drained as my mom grabbed his arm. Ethan stared at his plate like none of this involved him. I shoved my chair back so hard it hit the wall. Great, I said, my voice shaking. Then let's swing by the police first. They're very interested in what I sent them about you. My name is Zoey Mitchell. I was 31 years old when that dinner in Kansas City blew my family apart. Before I tell you how we got from Sunday pot roast to police reports, let me ask you something. If your spouse and your parents were fighting over the business your dad built with his bare hands, whose side would you take? Drop your answer and where you're watching from in the comments, because I still can't believe how many people chose wrong that night. My mom begged everyone to calm down. My dad demanded his paperwork back. Cole kept saying, "It's already done." And Ethan just watched, like it was entertainment. That chaos didn't start there, though. It started with a lifetime of Ethan being the favorite and me being the younger, expendable kid orbiting my dad's precious storage units on the edge of Kansas City. When I was in middle school, my dad poured everything into Mitchell Storage and Supply, a squat grid of metal units off I-70. He dug trenches, hung roll-up doors, chased late rent, and came home smelling like dust and grease. Every future conversation involved Ethan learning the books, Ethan running the plow truck, Ethan inheriting something solid. I was the artsy one who went into marketing and social media, which my dad called pretend work. I still painted doors, stuffed envelopes, and helped update the website, but everyone knew Ethan would someday own the place. I was the backup child, good enough to help, never important enough to plan around, always reminded my brother would need the money more than I ever would. Cole walked into my life right when I'd finally stopped trying to impress my parents. We met at a downtown networking mixer where he introduced himself as a consultant who helped small businesses restructure debt and scale. He was funny polished, and he actually listened when I talked about feeling invisible next to Ethan and my dad's obsession with occupancy rates. Within 3 months, he knew every story about my family, from my mom's obsessive receipt piles to my dad's refusal to take vacations away from the storage yard. He said he admired how loyal I was. My parents adored him immediately, especially when he praised my dad's portfolio. Ethan smiled along, but there was always a flicker behind his eyes when Cole steered the conversation toward the business. By the time Cole proposed, my mom was already touring venues, and my dad was bragging that finally, one of my kids understands business. They wrote a check for more than $20,000 for our wedding reception without blinking, something they'd never offered me for school or anything else. Cole leaned into the grateful son-in-law role, spending weekends with my dad at the storage yard, walking the rows of units, asking careful questions about occupancy liens, insurance, and exactly how the title was held. If I noticed how often those questions circled back to ownership and aging, I told myself he was just being thorough. I wanted to believe I'd finally chosen someone my family could love without comparing me to Ethan. 2 nights after our courthouse ceremony and big barbecue reception, my parents invited us and Ethan for a quiet family dinner. It was supposed to be lasagna salad and my mom's peach cobbler. Halfway through dessert, Cole set down his fork and cleared his throat. "Tom, we should talk about the facility," he said. "Commercial properties like that are gold right now, and with your age and health, it's risky having it all in your name." My dad stiffened. "My health is fine. And it's my business." Cole smiled like he was humoring a child and floated the idea of an LLC where he and I would be managing partners to protect the family, with Ethan named as future operations lead. Naturally, the longer he talked, the clearer it became that my dad would be signing away control. Cole wrapped it in phrases like retirement planning, equity extraction, and simplifying things for Ethan. My own role sounded like a token line added for decoration. You realize you're basically asking him to hand the keys to you, I said, staring at him. Under the table, he squeezed my knee. Zoe, don't get emotional. This is just planning. Ethan chimed in that maybe Dad should hear Cole out since Cole knew more about finance than any of us. My dad's fork clattered onto his plate. I'm not signing a thing, he said, standing. There is no LLC, and I'm not moving anywhere. My mom glared at me, not Cole. You always have to stir things up, she hissed as we left. On the drive home, Cole went quiet, that flat, calculating quiet I would later recognize as dangerous. Over the next 2 days, he swung to overly sweet making breakfast, rubbing my shoulders, while I worked, repeating that he was only trying to protect my dad from predatory lenders and lawsuits. I kept replaying dinner in my head, especially Ethan calmly letting our dad be tag teamed. Growing up, Ethan got extra money for sports and car repairs while I was told to figure it out. Now, my parents were ready to give a man they'd known less than a year more influence over my dad's livelihood than they'd ever given me. That whiplash between being dismissed and being useful started to feel less random and more like someone else's strategy. Thursday afternoon, while I was at a client shoot, my phone buzzed with a call from our neighbor near the storage facility, Marjorie Blake. She'd known my parents since before I was born. Honey, is your dad okay? She asked immediately, her voice tight. She told me she'd seen Cole there that morning with another man in a suit carrying a clipboard and a laser measurer. They'd walked every row of units, taken photos of the office, and paced off the parking lot. He said it was a valuation for a refinance, Marjorie said, but your dad didn't look happy. And Tom never said a word to me about refinancing. Traffic blurred around me as I realized my dad wasn't the one being consulted about his own business at all. I drove straight to the storage office instead of home. My dad had already left for the day, so I used my key and sat at his ancient desktop. The browser history read like a punch to the gut. Someone had searched for quick commercial property sale, Kansas City sell self-storage business, fast transfer title, commercial real estate, Missouri power of attorney aging parent, and how to move owner out of daily operations. Several financing sites were still logged into Cole's email. Every link was a roadmap to removing my dad from the business he'd built. My hands shook as I photographed every screen. When Cole texted asking if I wanted takeout, I lied and said I was stuck editing late at the studio, just to keep him away from me for a few more hours. That night, after he fell asleep on the couch, I shut our bedroom door and scrolled through the screenshots until my vision blurred. I heard my old boss's voice in my head, the one who'd warned me when I first started freelancing, when someone keeps steering every conversation toward what they can control, believe them. I opened my laptop and looked up my parents' estate attorney, Scott Redding, who'd watched Ethan and me grow up. I left a voicemail explaining that my husband seemed to be arranging something with my dad's business and that my dad didn't fully understand it. I ended with one word that felt foreign in my mouth: fraud. Saying it out loud snapped everything into terrifying focus. This wasn't family drama anymore. It was a crime forming around us. Scott called me back the next morning and told me to come in immediately alone. His downtown office smelled like leather and coffee. He listened while I described the dinner, Marjorie's call, and the search history. When I finished, he exhaled slowly and opened a file drawer. Zoe. This isn't the first time I've heard the name Cole Harrington, he said, pulling out several thick folders. In case after case, Cole had married into families with aging small business owners, talked them into restructuring, then used forged signatures and shady loans to pull equity out, leaving them with crushing debt or no ownership at all. We've never had enough proof to make anything stick, Scott said carefully. Until now, maybe if you're willing to help us build a real case. The room seemed to tilt as he explained the pattern. Cole targeted people like me. The overlooked kid, desperate for approval, rushed the relationship, impressed the parents, then moved fast before anyone got outside advice. Once contracts were signed, he claimed everyone had agreed, and the older owner was simply confused. Your dad is exactly his demographic, Scott said gently. So are you. Shame burned through me as I thought about how quickly I'd married him after years of living in Ethan's shadow. What do? I asked. Scott told me not to confront Cole yet. Instead, he needed documentation, screenshots, emails, any recordings I could get. He would contact a detective in the financial crimes unit. If we play this right, he said, we can protect your dad and stop Cole. The next few days, my life split in two. On the surface, I went to shoots, posted campaigns, and kissed Cole goodbye like nothing had changed. Underneath, I quietly pulled our bank statements and saw transfers to shell companies with bland names. His LinkedIn was filled with vague testimonials from profiles that vanished when I clicked them. Through old case notes, Scott shared I tracked down a retired mechanic in Wichita and a widow in Tulsa. Both told nearly identical stories about a charming consultant named Cole who simplified their paperwork before they were pushed out of the businesses they'd built. With their permission, I recorded every call and sent the files to Scott. Each story made it harder to breathe and easier to stop gaslighting myself about what I was seeing. A few mornings later, I went to the storage facility under the excuse of grabbing updated photos for the website. While moving a dusty fake plant in the office, I noticed a tiny lens tucked behind a stack of business cards facing my dad's desk. A small SD card stuck out of the side. My stomach lurched. I locked the office door, slid the card out, and drove home with it hidden in my sports bra because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. On my laptop, more than 40 video files popped up starting from the week before our wedding. Half showed my dad taking calls and counting cash like always. The others showed my husband treating my family like pieces on a board he was rearranging for profit. In one clip, Cole leaned against the desk while my dad was clearly out in the yard, phone on speaker. "He's perfect," Leo Cole said, laughing. "Old school proud, owns everything free and clear, and still treats the daughter like an afterthought. Ethan's the heir, Zoey is the emotional leverage. We get the units under an LLC, pull out a refinance, then ease the old man toward independent senior living." The man he called Leo, later identified as Notary Leonard Briggs, asked about title insurance and signatures. Cole assured him he'd handled older scribbles before. Hearing my husband describe my parents and me like targets, not people, flipped a switch. My marriage ended in that moment. The legal paperwork just had to catch up to the truth I'd seen on screen. Scott didn't waste time once I brought him copies of the recordings. By Monday afternoon, I was in a windowless room at police headquarters downtown, across from Detective Monica Alvarez from Financial Crimes. She'd already heard Cole's name. "We've suspected him in at least 5 cases," she said, tapping her pen. "But this is the first time we've had him bragging on tape, and a family member willing to cooperate." She laid out a plan that made my palms sweat. They would wire my parents' house and the storage office with hidden cameras and mics. All they needed was for Cole to show up with whatever documents he was preparing while my dad and I reacted naturally. "We need him recorded attempting the actual fraud," she said. "Talking isn't enough for court." The next day, a tech team came to my parents' house in an unmarked van posing as internet installers. Tiny cameras went into the light fixture over the dining table and the corner of my dad's home office. Another set went into the storage office behind framed certificates and smoke detectors. Detective Alvarez handed me a key fob-sized panic button and a nearly invisible earpiece. "Your job is to be yourself," she said. "Ask the questions any reasonable person would ask. Don't tip him off." My mom grumbled about all the appointments, but when she heard Cole was restructuring the business for Ethan's future, she relaxed. My parents still saw Ethan as the center, me as the helper, and Cole as the genius who'd finally make it all pay off. By Friday, Cole was back to talking openly about moving things along. Over breakfast, he mentioned that the bank had pre-approved a refinance using the storage facility as collateral, that my dad had basically agreed in principle, and that all he needed was final signatures. Detective Alvarez texted that she expected movement over the weekend. Sunday afternoon, my parents hosted another dinner so Cole could present options more calmly. Ethan arrived in a new shirt my parents had clearly bought him already, calling the storage yard our family asset. I sat buttering rolls, the panic button digging into my palm. When Cole's SUV pulled up and I saw Leonard Briggs climb out with a leather portfolio, my heart slammed so hard I was sure the hidden microphones would pick it up. At the table, Cole opened exactly the way you heard at the beginning, slamming papers down and announcing the transfer like it was already done. Leonard laid out the documents with a practiced smile. Mr. Mitchell, these reflect the sale of Mitchell Storage and Supply into a new entity for estate planning, he said smoothly. You signed preliminary versions earlier, he tapped a forged signature, and this is just the final execution. My dad frowned. I never signed this, he said. Leonard's tone went condescending. Sometimes older clients don't remember every document, sir. My mom flinched at older, but stayed quiet. Through the tiny speaker in my ear, I heard Alvarez whisper, "Keep him talking." I drew a breath and decided that if my family wouldn't protect themselves, I would. So let me get this straight, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. You two formed an LLC where you and Cole control my dad's storage facility, pulled out a refinance based on his equity, and now you're telling him he already agreed? Leonard's gaze flicked to Cole. Zoey, we discussed this. Cole snapped. It's a family decision. I laughed, but it came out sharp. Funny, because the families in Wichita and Tulsa thought it was a family decision too. So did the ones in Omaha and Topeka. Detective Alvarez is very interested in how you keep repeating the same script. Cole went pale and started grabbing the documents. You're overreacting, he muttered, just as car doors slammed outside and red and blue lights washed over the curtains. Officers flooded the front yard. Detective Alvarez stepped into the dining room, badge out. Cole Harrington, Leonard Briggs. Stay where you are, she said. You're under arrest for commercial fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and elder financial abuse. Leonard's hands shot up. I'll cooperate, he blurted. I have files. Save it for your attorney, she cut in. Cole turned to me, eyes wild. Zoe, tell them this is a misunderstanding. I was doing this for your family. My dad looked between us, hurt and stunned. No, I said quietly, standing. You were doing it to my family? As they cuffed him, neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, including Marjorie with her arms crossed. For once, Ethan had nothing clever to say. He just watched the future he'd been counting on disappear into a police cruiser. 8 weeks later, I sat in a Jackson County courtroom as clips from that SD card played on a big monitor. The retired mechanic and the widow I'd spoken with testified along with Marjorie and my dad. Cole's attorney tried to spin it as aggressive but legal estate planning, but the recordings of him calling me emotional leverage and joking about moving old guys out of the way shredded every excuse. Judge Patricia Vaughn didn't bother hiding her disgust. She sentenced Cole to 13 years in state prison with restitution to every victim they could document. Leonard got 5 years after agreeing to testify in other cases. My divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. Walking out of court, I felt grief relief and a strange, quiet pride braided together inside my chest. You'd think that would be when my parents apologized or when Ethan thanked me for saving the business he'd always expected to inherit. Instead, my mom complained about the embarrassment at church. My dad muttered that none of this would have happened if you'd just picked a normal guy, and Ethan was mostly angry that the refinance money he'd already mentally spent on a truck no longer existed. When I suggested hiring a professional manager so my dad could actually slow down, they snapped that I was trying to control things and reminded me again that Ethan would take over someday. The fact that I had literally kept them from losing everything mattered less than that I'd involved the police and made them look weak. So I made my own plan. I moved to a smaller place in Omaha, took on more clients who needed digital marketing for their small businesses, and started volunteering with a nonprofit that teaches seniors how to protect themselves from financial scams. I changed my number and blocked my parents, Ethan, and every aunt who told me I should forgive because family is family. Mitchell Storage and Supply still exists, but it's no longer my responsibility or my problem. My family made it clear they were willing to trade my safety and sanity for Ethan's comfort and their illusion of control. I am done giving them chances or explanations. If someone shows you that you're expendable, the most self respecting thing you can do is believe them. Now my life is quieter, but it finally feels like mine. I've learned that loyalty without boundaries is just self destruction, dressed up as virtue, and that walking away from people who share your last name can be the healthiest decision you ever make. I won't let anyone, spouse or parent, use me as leverage again. If you've sat through a dinner where you realized you were the sacrifice on the table, hear me. You're allowed to leave, even if they call you selfish. Thank you for listening to my story. Share your thoughts below. What would you do in my place? And have you ever watched a family dinner turn into a battlefield like that?